On your Thursday episode of Locked On Raptors, the Toronto Raptors lost a game last night to the Denver Nuggets in which their defense was not very good. Scottie Barnes was awesome, and the lineup decisions were a little bit baffling. Stop me if you've heard this before.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Thursday, December the 21st, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the website that's busted at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors, and of course, you can come hang out in the Locked On Raptors Discord server, a great spot to be after wins, after losses, in between games, whenever you just want to talk a little about video games or music or whatever is on your mind. It's all in there. Come be part of our listener family over there on the Discord. Link is in the description, and it's free to join. We'll see you there. Of course, you can find the show for free wherever you get your podcast. Please follow, subscribe to, rate, and review on the audio side of things. The ratings and reviews are very, very nice, especially this time of year. It can be your little holiday present to me. And you, of course, can also go to YouTube and subscribe to the channel. Hit the little notification bell so you never miss an episode when it goes live, which is a perfect thing for our everydayers out there to go and do. All right, let's get to it. On today's show, we're breaking down a 113-104 Toronto Raptors loss to the Denver Nuggets, which, look, they're the defending champions. They have Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. You're probably going to lose to the Denver Nuggets, but as we'll get into with today's guest, Jamar Hinds from Raptors Republic, a lot of similar notes, I would say, for the Raptors in this one, despite it being against an opponent that you can kind of be okay losing to. There were some bright spots, in particular, Scottie Barnes, 30, 10, and 5, doing the Scottie Barnes thing. He's been pretty bloody consistent lately. It's pretty exciting. He's been awesome, and the rest of the team around him kind of did not pull the weight in this one. There were some good performances we'll get to. We'll get to Precious Achiuwa, who I thought was really nice in this game. We got the good, the bad, and the coming up later. But Jamar, I guess we should just kind of start with the stuff that we know, the routine sort of talking points that we have after these games, because they feel like they're the exact same every time. I will say, I think the shape of it is a little different in this one. The starters were actually like a positive in this game, which is a very rare occurrence. So good for them, I suppose. Outside of Scottie Barnes and maybe Pascal Siakam for a couple stretches, I don't think any of the starters exactly covered themselves in glory in this game, but the lineup itself was pretty positive. That said, you have Dennis Schroeder going Dennis Schroeder mode down the stretch. You have a late sub in for Pascal Siakam with only 5.5 minutes to go with the game still very much gettable at that point. That's been a bit of a perplexing thing, the late subs for Pascal. And again, just kind of a lot of stuff we know with this team. The defense not very good. Where do you want to start with this one, Jamar? It did feel very much like the Groundhog Day effect once again taking place for your Toronto Raptors. But maybe there was some different stuff you pointed out. What you got?
Well, let's start with the starters, because obviously it's becoming laughable at this point, but the Raptors have not won a first quarter since November 29th against the Suns. Meaning that's a stretch of 8 games the Raptors have not won a first quarter all month. They were down 29-20 after the first quarter. They were down 17 at the half. The starters did actually end up being a +3. Thanks to Keeks for that. But yeah, it's the same question we keep asking, and now Jack is openly asking it on the broadcast about, when are the Raptors going to make a change to the lineup? A lot of it's been focused around Dennis Schroeder. Darko was asked about this post-game, about, what the thought process he has in regards to making a lineup. He mentioned a couple of things about how if he were to make a lineup change, it would actually shorten his rotation, and he doesn't know if he wants to go that route right now. Also, Jakob Poeltl hasn't had the greatest stretch of late. His minutes have been dwindling as well. And just the way Darko was answering those questions about, wanting to talk to Jakob and hopefully, he can get back on track as soon as possible. It feels like if Darko was going to make a starting lineup change, he'd go against the grain of what everybody's thinking, and he would actually start small instead of most people were thinking bench Dennis for Gary Trent Jr.
Gary, yeah.
But I feel like Darko would actually still bring in Gary, but probably bench Jakob instead. That's
Yeah.
just my guess of the way, and maybe I should have put this as my but that's just the way I feel like he's going to go. I feel like he still wouldn't sit Dennis, which will probably infuriate some people. But yeah, you talk about him taking over in the fourth. What was his usage rate was like in the 40s in the fourth quarter of this game.
Yeah, I mean, he took 4 shots. Precious took 5, which, hey, Precious was going off. Go nuts, King.
Precious was going off.
But yeah, you had 4 shots for Dennis Schroeder down the stretch, a wide open bricked 3. He had a turnover that was just like a really hopeless bounce pass in the feet of the defender trying to get it to Scottie Barnes, and just kind of some baffling decisions. Whereas Scottie Barnes and Pascal combined for 4 shot attempts together in the fourth quarter, despite being basically without answer on the Denver Nuggets side of things all night long. Great stuff.
And then you mentioned the defense. Defense, I mean, they've had worse defensive efforts recently, but
Sure.
I saw a few notes from other people about OG Anunoby's defense specifically kind of tapering off in the last few games. What have you seen in that? Have you seen anything there?
I've been talking about this for a little bit now. Like, he's not the all-world defender he was last season. I think part of it's scheme, right? Like, he's not being asked to go and hawk steals like he was last year when he led the league in steals.
Yeah,
he's being asked to play more of a conservative style. They're bringing less help in the middle of the floor, and so that's naturally going to affect the sort of counting stats. But in general, I mean, think of the number of times in the last few years you've been able to throw OG Anunoby on a guard who's going off and shut him down. Jamal Murray was getting his way in this game, even when OG was guarding him. And I think we've seen this a little bit. Like, he's been maybe like 15% less impactful as an on-ball wing defender this season than he was last year, where he was just terrorizing dudes nonstop. And if he's 15% less of a defender in those on-ball situations, that's pretty significant considering the offensive growth from him has not been there. And I think at this point, like, the mythical OG Anunoby offensive leap, it's just not coming, man. Like, he's a very good play finisher. He's an excellent three-point shooter. He throws down chin-up dunks under the rim. That's all well and good. But you put the ball in his hands, and he's not creating much. We saw a flash of it last night where the Raptors ran that OG plus bench lineup to start the fourth quarter. And I think they got lucky to not lose those minutes, and that lineup actually acquitted itself really nicely. They ran a zone. It worked pretty well, but OG was not creating stuff in that lineup, and that's the time for him to go and do that. I just don't think it's coming. And so if OG is 85% of the defender he was last season, can you justify paying him near max money? Like, that is a real question with the offensive limitations he has. You can justify it if he is a no-doubt, no-brainer, all-defense guy. I don't think he's been that this year, and I think that matters. And it's not to say he's bad. It's not to say he's fallen off, to a hilarious degree. But wing defense is this thing where it's hard to have the same impact as a big, and if you're not doing it at sort of like a unicorn level like OG was last season, then the cracks start to show a little bit more. And so, yeah, I think that's been a big thing.
2 more points regarding Jokic and Murray. So I feel like you can live with what Murray did last game. I mean, this game he had 20 points, but he needed 22 shots to get it. So if you make him a volume shooter like that, I think you'll live with that. Regarding Jokic, though, obviously they've had success in the past putting an OG on Jokic. Even I think Scottie's guarded Jokic at length in past seasons. They threw a bunch of different bodies at him, whether it be Anunoby sometimes, Poeltl sometimes.
Poor Siakam got cooked a couple times, man. He can't guard Jokic. This is not a surprise.
Yeah, right. And I think the Nuggets were hunting this, like, when the Raptors would switch, and then he would end up with a Gary on him, or even worse, he'd have Malachi Flynn on him. So that didn't help. And then obviously, the last 5 minutes of the game, I think the Nuggets scored on 5 straight possessions after Precious cut the lead to 5. And basically it was what Denver used to win the finals, just your Jokic Murray 2-man game. And I think the backbreaking one was when Jokic was, I think Boucher was on KCP in the corner, and then overhelping on Jokic, and he's gonna find, especially strong side, he's gonna find that guy easily, and then that's kind of how the game went awry, where I mean,
Look, that's life. It's
well, how
Jokic,
much
man.
how much can you do about Jokic? That's also
Yeah.
like in terms of overall defensively, I'm not even really all that mad about this game. This is not like Charlotte going off or Atlanta's dropping 130 points at will, even though they are a good offensive team. I don't think I was too angry about the defense, but I mean, yeah.
It was not their best. They
No.
did hold the Nuggets to a worse half-court offensive rating than the Raptors were able to put up in this game against Denver's defense, which is interesting. That's a little look ahead to the good, the bad, and the coming up later on. That's what we call a tease in the business. But yeah, I think the thing with me with Jokic, like I think this is where it's not about the results necessarily of the defense last night. I thought the results were fine. They really tightened the screws in the second half compared to what it was in the first. The first, they were kind of porous. But, for me, I know they went to that zone and it worked a little bit. You were playing with fire, playing a zone against Nikola Jokic and giving up the middle to Nikola Jokic. And to me, that was kind of like a bit of like, really, Darko? Like, this is where you're going zone? Like, we've not seen a whole lot of zone packages from this team all season long. Of course, they were famed for it under Nick Nurse. And to bust it out when Nikola Jokic is roaming around the middle of the floor, you're trying to come back in a game. It worked. So credit to them, I guess. They got some lucky sort of shot variance in that spot. But there were a couple times where Jokic is in the middle. And as much as you can try to keep a guy in the zone, sort of tagging him and in his face, you give him the ball at the free throw line with one guy on him to beat, he's going to beat you. He's Nikola freaking Jokic. And so I didn't love the way they went about handling Jokic in this game. I don't think there was enough OG on him, frankly. I think there was a little too much of the sort of different looks that they threw. OG's been historically very successful in that matchup. And so, yeah, a bit of, I suppose, a different tone to some of the things that went wrong in this game. But I think a lot of the through lines continue. Just the strange lack of a defensive identity, which, by the way, we're talking about on tomorrow's podcast with Dave Dufour from The Athletic, so keep an eye out. But yeah, the lack of defensive identity, the strange lineup choices, the entirely too much Dennis Schroeder, all of that comes in to play in a loss that follows a lot of the same script notes that previous Raptors losses have. One thing that was different, Jamar, was the closing lineup. For the second straight game, the Raptors went away from the starters to close, which is good. That's baby steps, progress, baby. We are going to talk about Precious Achiuwa and his performance and what's become a bit of a trend of Precious Achiuwa being really darn good. We're going to get to that in just 1 second here. Today's show is brought to you by our pals over at eBay Motors, who have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for daily fantasy drafts or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players who are guaranteed to fit on your roster. Before I begin diving into the players this week, those in the Locked On Raptors Listener League, cover your ears. I don't want you getting this advice. It's just for me and the people not competing with me in the Locked On Raptors Listener League. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Talked yesterday about Brandon Pajemski. There's Tari Eason. There's Grayson Allen. There's Malachi Brandon. But what about James Wiseman? Old Jim. The Pistons are a nightmare. They're so bad. We know this, but they've changed up their big man rotation a little bit. Isaiah Stewart's hurt, and Wiseman's produced in the last few games out. Confidence is very, very low, of course. It's James Wiseman, but the numbers and the opportunity are there. So maybe, just maybe, James Wiseman is worth a pickup. Maybe you're someone like me in the Locked On Raptors Listener League where you had Mitchell Robinson, and he's out for the year now. Very bummer news. That stinks. Maybe I'll go pick myself up some James Wiseman to fill in the Mitchell Robinson gaps. We shall see if that is a good strategy. Either way, Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you with your fantasy basketball championship or win your fantasy basketball championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. The same goes for your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit available to U.S. customers only. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And we continue on here. Jamar Hinds from Raptors Republic, the god of the game recap, as we love to call him around here. Went to the game last night and still writing great recaps. He's the king. Of course, a reminder before we dive into Precious Achiuwa's work last night, Locked On Sports 24/7 is the first of its kind daily 24/7 stream of Locked On podcasts. You got to go check it out. It's national shows, it's local shows covering the biggest stories. You're going to want to be there. It's just a thing to put on and have running throughout the entire day if you really want to. A great way to fill your work day. If you're that type of person, go check it out. You'll actually be directed to that channel right after you finish watching this on YouTube if you're watching on the tube. So subscribe once you're there and get that Locked On Sports national coverage all day long. Go check it out. Okay, Jamar, Precious Achiuwa. Pretty nice game last night. 13 points. He goes 4 of 5 in the fourth quarter alone. Hits that big three. Finishes 6 of 10 on the night. 13 points, 5 boards, an assist, a steal, a block, a +6. And he closes this game in place of Jakob Poeltl. Of course, they went with the smaller lineup to close in the previous game against the Hornets with Gary Trent Jr. in there in place of Jakob Poeltl. They go a little bigger, of course, with Precious Achiuwa offering some of the best resistance against Jokic of anyone on the team in this game. What were your impressions of Precious Achiuwa's game in this one? I thought it was just another, of late, man, it's another little notch in the maybe Precious is back category. I'm not ready to totally declare it yet. Obviously, the heights of 21-22 were so high that it's going to be a lot. It might take a lot of time for people to trust that that's back, but he's been pretty darn good lately. And to me, he's like the guy I trust the most coming off the bench right now to offer something each and every night.
Yeah, he had one possession in particular where he basically stonewalled Jokic trying to do anything in the post.
Yeah.
So that was good. I actually didn't like pretty much anything from the bench in the first half. This was all second half we're talking about. Because the first half, it was funny. Denver's was just all comfortable running in all 5 bench unit. And there is the series of turnovers in the second quarter where it was just bizarre. And Denver scored 10 straight points basically off transition alone. Mm-hmm. But Precious was probably the main factor in the Raptors trying to make this a game because, for the most part in the third quarter, it was basically like a 20-point game. Mm-hmm. And then Precious came in, had a couple of drives, even made a 3 late in the fourth quarter to make it a 5-point game. I thought Gary and Malachi making a couple threes was good in that stretch as well. But yeah, with Precious, when it comes to him, it's all about consistency. And, obviously he's been in and out of the lineup the last couple seasons with like different injuries and whatnot, which he mentioned after the game. But I thought that Precious, even on the offensive glass, he had 4 offensive boards. So that was big as well. That had a putback dunk. But just trying to see this more consistently from Precious. Like you said, can't fully trust him yet because his game has been.
He's a roller coaster, man. We know
exactly.
This. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and yeah, it's just I just want to see more of it. If he could at every 5 games, this used to be a Nick Nurse quote where trying to go from 2 good games every 5 to 3 good games every 5 to 4 good games every 5 to be a little bit more consistent. So I feel like over the last 5 games, Precious has probably had 3 good games. So now if we can, raise that up, I'm still holding my breath because, every so often you'll have those stretches where, he's cutting to the rim. You can't catch a pass. It's like, what are we doing here? And sometimes there'll be defensive slippage, but no, yesterday was a good game for Precious. He had a podium game. So, yeah. When you're at the podium, normally you had a pretty decent game, even in a loss. So I'll take that.
Over the last 15 games, of which Precious Achiuwa has played 14 for the Toronto Raptors, Jamar, just 17 minutes a game, which feels low. 9 points, 6 boards, 2.2 assists. So that's like 5 assists per 36. That's interesting. That's like, he's figuring out some of the feel stuff. They're using him at the elbows more. We saw him throw a lob to Scottie Barnes last night. That was like, okay, like this is stuff that Precious was not doing before. Obviously, the
You know what?
defensive end, I think he's been pretty strong as well. He opens up a lot of switching possibilities for them. He's been a perfectly cromulent sort of rim protector, at least when it comes to the percentages. He's not deterring shots at the rim necessarily, but he's contesting well and makes it difficult when guys get in there. He's also shooting 37% on 2 threes a game. It's not nothing. That is something to keep an eye on because he's had these flashes before where it's been real. I think he should play more than 17 minutes a game at this point, man. I really do. And, it's been ratcheting up a little bit in recent games here. Or has it? No, he had 24 in the last game, but he's been around 17 basically all the way through the last 5 or 10 games. More Precious, man. I think it's not just that he's playing well, Jamar. I think it's also that he is one of the few guys on the team. When you take all the guys and throw them at the wall to see what sticks around Scottie Barnes, I think Precious might be one of the stickiest right now. And it's because of the defense. It's because of the maybe return to the 3-point shot. And I think it's just because of the general fit with Scottie Barnes and sort of an idealized version of this team that I'm pretty keen on, man. Like, I've been thinking about this. Like, what is the best way to build a team around Scottie Barnes? Who are the sort of fulcrum pieces you want around Scottie Barnes to optimize what he can do? What can Scottie Barnes do? It's everything, right? He can handle the ball. He can play as a really, really devastating spot up guy with his pull up 3 now, his catch and shoot 3 now being such a weapon that he's, drawing closeouts. He's driving by those closeouts. He's making havoc when he gets downhill. He's obviously hitting those threes at a high rate too. He's been a very good spot up player. And he's also a good, small ball big as a role man. You got to have players who can fit in around those different archetypes and sort of mold their games to allow Scottie those little pockets to be in each of those different areas. And I think obviously we've talked about the need for like a quick guard who has a little bit of point guard chops, but who can also play off the ball. My Emmanuel Quickley fixation is not going anywhere. I think Pascal Siakam is proving that like a post hub working around Scottie Barnes to free him up and work him off ball a little bit is a really valuable thing. And I think a spacing center who can also offer some defensive versatility, that's another beautiful thing. I've been so keen on Miles Turner for years now. If Precious Achiuwa can kind of replicate 70% of Miles Turner, you might be cooking with gas. And over the last little while, he's kind of doing that. Maybe they have some of the guys who are already the ideal fits with Scottie Barnes already in house. And Pascal, people know how I feel about that. Those two dudes continue to have a great 2-man game, and they should have run it way more down the stretch of the last night's game, because when those two dudes link up on a possession, it usually leads to points, and they just did not tap into that enough. But the Precious stuff, the fact that he's closing, the fact that he's looking pretty good in these lineups with Pascal and Scottie, I don't know, man. I'm getting rather intrigued by what the sort of future might hold for him, is if this is really something he can sustain.
One thing, you mentioned the passing, and he only had the 1 assist in this game with the lob to Scottie, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. But it is something I have noticed more and more this season. He had 5 assists against the Hawks, the bad game, the game that the Raptors lost. He also had 5 assists against the Pistons. And that's probably when I first noticed it, because he's kind of in the high post area, finding cutters and stuff like that. And that's something you did not see with Precious in the past. He was more so a finisher, or he would just catch, quick decision type possessions where he'd just catch and drive, or shoot an open 3 or something like that. So that is something Darko mentioned after that Pistons game. He's like, that's the first thing he noticed about Precious, is that, his passing ability, which is like, But it is something that Darko has tried to open up, and he's given Precious opportunities when he's in these second unit lineups to, kind of find guys a little bit. So I feel like that's going to be more utilized more and more. And especially if he's playing with guys like Scottie and Pascal, and if Precious has the ball, it might give him more opportunities to find guys like he did with Scottie on a lob last night. So that's just something to notice as well.
Yeah, and you talk about, changing up the lineups and sort of tinkering with stuff. We don't know if this would work, and maybe it's not quite enough space. But if you're looking at swapping out Jakob Poeltl, the first blush is, maybe Gary Trent Jr. slides in, but maybe that's Precious's job. Maybe Precious slides in place of Jakob Poeltl. He's a little more spacey, obviously, than Jakob Poeltl is. He's only at 31% on the season. Teams aren't going to care if he's shooting threes, but he can actually knock them down, it seems. And you have just like the defensive wall of OG, Siakam, Barnes, and Precious. I mean, that's a switching defense's heaven right there. You can really, I think, address their very porous perimeter defense by including a little bit more switching. And I think Precious allows that more than Jakob Poeltl does at this point. So maybe that's something there. Maybe you just go full scorched earth and bench both Dennis and Yak and bring in Gary and Precious and go crazy. I would not be opposed to that. That sounds super fun and weird. But one way or another, Precious Achiuwa is, to me, outside of Scotty Barnes, probably the second brightest light of the season, at least of late, in terms of like individual player performances and what it means for the long haul. It's pretty good stuff. We'll come back to the side, Jamar. We're going to round it out with the good, the bad, and the that we round out every single Raptors recap episode of the pod. We will do that in just 1 second. But first, today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. And look, it's a difficult time of year, right? It's dark, it's wintry, it's the very busy holiday season. You're reckoning with your New Year's resolutions, if that's a thing you partake in. There's a lot of introspection, there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's nice to have someone to talk to about all of that stuff right now. And you can give yourself the gift of taking care of yourself and having someone to lean on with a sort of insights and thoughts about what motivates you, what the best decisions for you are, by going and trying therapy. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. In the season of giving, give yourself what you need with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedInNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/LockedInNBA. BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. And we round out the show here. Jamar Hinds is along, breaking down the Toronto Raptors loss to the Denver Nuggets, 113-104. They fall to 11-16 on the season. You know, let's perk our spirits here, Jamar. We're going to do the good, the bad, and the We got the good stuff that we liked from the game, the bad stuff we didn't like from the game, and the stuff that has us intrigued for future things to come. What you got for your good in this one, Jamar?
My good is that third quarter pass from Scottie Barnes is like 3/4 of the court.
Oh my God, man.
Yeah. Aaron Gordon was kind of just like, running alongside him. So, it could have been deflected. It wasn't like Scottie was by himself. So yeah, but he throws it left hand all the way down the court to Siakam for the layup. That's one of Scottie's best passes I've seen. That was incredible. So that play alone is my good. I'm just keeping it real simple.
I think that's an outstanding choice, because that really kind of knocked me on my seat. I was sitting down watching the game, but if I wasn't, I would have had to sit down after watching that pass. My good, the half-court offense. Not a thing I thought I would say at all this season, Jamar, right? It's crazy. But last night, 106.3 half-court offensive rating. They outscored the Nuggets in half-court situations in the game last night. Pretty stunning stuff. And I've been talking about this a little bit. There's just been a steady progression for the half-court offense. There's all the concern about Darko Rajakovic and his rotations, and I think that's justified concern. And obviously the defense has not been what you want either. It doesn't feel like they have much of a plan or an identity. But the offense, I think, unquestionably knows what it wants to do. And I've made this point a couple times recently, but I'll reiterate. I don't feel like their offensive off nights now are tied to a total inability to get stuff going in the half court. It feels way more tied to like 3-point shooting variance, whether they get bench production, and just the overall sort of health of the offense. They're getting good stuff most times down the floor. A lot of that's through Scottie and Pascal, of course, but the progression of their half court offense has been notable on the season. They're 25th in half court offense. Not very good, but since November the 22nd, they're 21st. Since December the 1st, they're 19th. And since December the 8th, your Toronto Raptors have the 10th best half-court offense in the NBA. It's a small sample of games, of course, but there has been steady incremental progress for the half-court offense throughout the season. And I think as much as we criticize a lot of the coaching stuff, you have to credit it's kind of working. And they're doing it with a pretty limited roster in terms of skill sets. And they've still kind of managed to carve out a decent enough offense that if their defense can ever get it figured out, this team could be in pretty good shape. Of course, the defense feels a bit of a long way from getting things figured out. Jamar, what's your bad from this game?
Can I completely do a 180 on what you just said and question something coaching-wise right now?
Please do. Go nuts.
No, I just feel like the Siakam stuff is still weird. You mentioned the late sub when the Raptors were getting back into the game, and then it's still there's still spots for Siakam that feels clunky in terms of how to get him going offensively. It still seems like there's a reliance that Siakam will spot up and hit a open three when he's only shooting 26% from three this season. I'm still trying to find ways how, you could optimize Scotty and still have Pascal at his best and it's all, I know that a lot of that is dependent on what's around those two. It's not just to say those two alone, but in ways, when you look at Pascal's numbers, he's still averaging 21 points a game. He's actually shooting 50% from the field, something
he's a twos machine.
Yeah, something he hasn't done since the championship year. So there are positives in regards to that, and this is not real more. This is more so a question mark as opposed to a bad. But I just feel like he could still be used better.
Yeah, that's fair. I think, asking him to take 5 threes in a game is probably not what you want. That's part of that is the flow of the offense and where it comes.
Right.
That said, still 6 of 11 on twos last night, kind of doing his 2-point thing. And frankly, I think it gets easier because Scotty Barnes is a high volume 38% 3-point shooter now, right? Like there are ways you can work around that. Like I said, kind of last segment, I think using Pascal as a post hub, as much as the whole post up thing, oh no, you can't do that. It's selfish basketball or whatever the dumb discourse was coming out of last year. I think it just is undeniably effective basketball for this team, especially when Scotty Barnes is so devastating as a spot up guy right now. And so I think, to your point, it's more about what's around those two guys. I think Scotty and Pascal, I've made this point before, but I think the overlap between them is kind of not what it used to be, and they kind of do different things in different areas of the floor, mostly a testament to Scotty kind of being a jack of all trades. And I just think you have to find a way to, insert a little bit more in terms of complementary skill sets for those guys. Dennis Schroeder ain't it right now. Jakob Poeltl ain't it right now. OG Anunoby ain't it if he's not hitting his threes, which he hasn't of late. But those two guys, I feel good about that as a backbone of a team. Beyond that, that's where all the questions kind of come in for me. But yeah, the Pascal 5-minute, sub in the fourth quarter, like it's too late. Like the game's in the balance. Get the best offensive scorer you have on the team in the game against the Denver Nuggets. I feel like they shouldn't be waiting this long to get him in. Yes, they rode him deep into the third quarter, but he still only comes out with 36 minutes played in this game. Like I feel like they could have probably brought him back in around 7 or 8 when Jokic and Murray checked back in after the bench did a pretty admirable job to claw the Raptors back in. My bad for this game, Jamar, in the sort of same vein as the half-court offense, the transition offense, not been good lately, and it was miserable last night. Arguably the reason they lost the game, an 81.3 offensive rating in transition last night. Just not good enough. Like this team needs to live in transition, and typically over the course of this season, it has, but that's fallen on hard times of late too. As the offense has gotten better since around November 22nd, the last month or so, the transition offense itself has gotten worse. It's been the 22nd in transition offense since November the 22nd, which is not where this team can be, right? Like they were killing it. They were the best transition team in basketball for a long stretch to start the year. That's fallen off. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Scotty's still a maestro. Siakam's still a great finisher on the run. I don't know where the extra misses and duffed possessions are coming from. Really, I probably have to go back and kind of really dig into the transition stuff for this team to figure out what's happening there. But that's been a thing. It's been a sore spot, and it was very much a sore spot last night that cost them the game. What's your from this game, Jamar?
Well, we've already talked about it a little bit, and I said off the top that I should have maybe talked about this as my But Darko's just answers to the line of questions last night just had me thinking, because like I said, the conventional wisdom has been to bring Schroeder off the bench so that he could lead the second lineup, since his usage rate tends to be higher. It kind of felt like that made sense, and have another shooter in Gary play alongside Scotty and Pascal and run Scotty at the point, which a lot of people have been asking for all offseason, just to see, even if it doesn't work, just to see what it looks like.
Yeah.
So that was the conventional wisdom, but just hearing Darko yesterday, more specifically talk about Jakob, makes me feel like they would go small. And you brought up a great point as well about, Precious and how good he's been playing lately. So maybe Gary doesn't come in still, and maybe they bring in Precious. But I just feel like I just want to see a change of some sort. And then, okay, if it doesn't work, at least you're experimenting. I mean, you're 11 and 16, right? So it's not like you have to worry about if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It is broke. When you haven't won a first quarter, the entire month, yeah, it's broken. So I would like to see some sort of change. Darko has been very reluctant to do this, but if he does make a change, now I wonder what change he's going to make, because I felt like it was kind of obvious, but maybe not as much after listening to him.
Yeah, you would hope that like middling to decent results in a single game don't push back the decision that we all know needs to be made at some point here by another 3, 4, 5, 10 games. But it feels like that's happened, right? Like every time it's gotten like close to the breaking point of, the starters are so bad. It's undeniable. They have to change them. They'll have a good game. And it's like, well, okay, we'll talk to you in 2 weeks, I guess. Maybe not the way I would go about things, kind of using one game little samples here and there to justify keeping a lineup together that does not work, but here we are. Let me just pull up the lineup, the numbers for the starters very quickly here. Per our friends over at Cleaning the Glass, it's been a rough scene. It has been really for most of the season. Of course, we know this, but a little update. Yeah, the Raptors starter is still a minus 4.7 net rating. Not good, Jamar. They've played 697 possessions together. That's a lot of possessions. It's like a fifth of all of the possessions that the Raptors have had this season have been that lineup, or more than a fifth, almost a quarter. It's not good. They're the second most used lineup in all of basketball, and they're a minus 4.7. Something's got to give, man. And I'm hopeful. If I'm going to weave in my I didn't really have a because I feel like we're not learning a whole lot, and that itself is a But my here is they closed 2 straight games without Jakob Poeltl. Maybe this is a signal that some kind of flex is coming on how they're rolling out these lineups. So we'll see. We're going to wrap it there. Jamar, thanks so much for hanging out, buddy. This was great. Anything you want to promote for the good people out there?
Yeah, I have a recap of this game up on Raptors Republic right now that you can take in. I also am going to do a preview for the Jazz game on Saturday and a recap on Sunday.
Thank you so much for tuning in, Jamar. Hope you have a lovely holiday, my man. We'll talk to you again in the new year, of course. Go check out all Jamar's great recaps and every other thing he writes over at Raptors Republic. You can find me at Woodley Sean. Follow, subscribe to, rate, review the podcast for free wherever you get your podcasts. It's always appreciated when you do that. We're on YouTube, of course. Subscribe, hit the notification bell. Never miss an episode. We'll be back again tomorrow with Dave Dufour from The Athletic and the Nerder She Wrote podcast, and of course, assistant coaching the Georgian national basketball team at the FIBA World Cup this past summer. Dude knows his ball. We're going to try to talk defense. I've already recorded it, so I can tell you, we don't just talk defense. We meander all over the place when it comes to the Raptors because Dave's really smart, and I wanted to pick his brain on a whole bunch of Raptors-y things. So if that's to look forward to on Friday's podcast. Until then, thank you so much for hanging. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.